Welcome to Spicy Family Scandals, where real-life drama meets hard-earned wisdom. Today's story is about betrayal, resilience, and the power of standing up for yourself. Let's dive in.
They say you never really know someone until they feel they've beaten you. That's exactly what I learned last Friday night when my mother-in-law, Janet, decided to use me as her personal punching bag in front of the entire family. But let me start with the part no one knows. Something I've never admitted to anyone until now. I wasn't supposed to marry Eric. 12 years ago, when Eric and I were still dating, I had doubts. Not about him, but about them, his family. Janet always made me feel like an outsider, but Eric would shrug it off, saying, "That's just how she is. She's harmless." I should have seen the red flags. I should have walked away. But I didn't. Because I loved him. And because I thought love would be enough to fix everything. Spoiler alert. It wasn't. Fast forward to last week. It was supposed to be a celebration, Eric's birthday party at our house. I spent hours decorating, cooking, and making sure everything was perfect. Not for Janet, mind you, I gave up trying to impress her years ago, but for Eric. He deserved a special day. And if Janet wanted to roll her eyes at my store-bought centerpiece or nitpick my choice of wine, so be it. I was used to it. What I wasn't prepared for was the spectacle she made at dinner. The moment her voice cut through the room, I knew it was coming. "Well," Janet said, pushing her plate away with exaggerated disdain, "I suppose hosting isn't for everyone. At least Eric has a job to keep the household afloat, right?" The words hit me like a slap. My job, my actual real job as a freelance graphic designer, apparently didn't count because I worked from home. It wasn't the first time she'd implied I was lazy or unambitious, but this time she wasn't subtle. She turned to Melissa, her other daughter-in-law, and cooed, "You must be so exhausted running your bakery and raising 3 kids. I don't know how you do it. Women these days just don't have your work ethic." I caught Eric's eye, hoping he'd step in, but he was already looking down at his plate, pretending not to hear. My jaw clenched. My hands trembled under the table. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd respond. But I didn't. I just smiled tightly and excused myself to check on dessert. That's when I saw it. A box of Melissa's cupcakes, sitting on my countertop like a mocking trophy. I don't know why, but seeing those perfect little frosted treats was the final straw. Something snapped inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done with Janet's condescending smirks. Done with Eric's spineless silence. Done pretending I could kill her with kindness, when all she wanted was to watch me crumble. If Janet wanted to treat me like I was nothing, I'd show her exactly what that looked like. What I did next? Well, let's just say it was the start of a game she didn't even know she was playing. But trust me, she's going to lose. I spent the rest of the evening smiling through clenched teeth, performing my best impression of the perfect hostess. Janet didn't stop there, of course. With every bite of food, she made another jab. My chicken was a bit dry. The salad was an interesting choice, and my wine? A little cheap, don't you think? Melissa, ever the golden child, chimed in with her usual sugary sweetness. "Oh, Janet, you know how hard it is to host. I mean, I love cooking for the family, but not everyone has the energy after a full day at work. It's so admirable that she tries." By the time the last guest left, I was vibrating with silent rage. Eric predictably avoided me like I was a ticking time bomb. He disappeared into the bedroom, muttering something about being tired, leaving me alone with a house full of dirty dishes and a brain buzzing with thoughts I couldn't quite untangle. But then, as I stared at the mess in the kitchen, the memory of those cupcakes came back to me. Perfectly frosted, meticulously arranged, and every single one of them practically worshipped by Janet during dessert. I wasn't sure if it was the wine or pure adrenaline, but an idea took root in my mind, something I'd never considered before. Janet always played her games with a smile, hiding her venom behind a mask of maternal concern. Maybe it was time to show her I could play dirty too. The next morning, I waited for Eric to leave for work before pulling out my laptop. I knew Janet's routine like clockwork. She prided herself on her predictability. Every Tuesday, she hosted a book club at her house. A book club that Melissa never failed to attend, along with a few of Janet's equally judgmental friends. I also knew Janet loved to brag about her cooking and insisted on providing home-baked treats for her guests, even though she rarely did more than arrange store-bought goods on a platter. That's when the plan clicked into place. I drove to the grocery store, carefully selecting a box of cupcakes almost identical to the ones Melissa had brought to Eric's party. But I wasn't just shopping for sweets. I made another stop, this one at a pharmacy. What I picked up there, let's just say it had the potential to turn Janet's book club into an unforgettable experience. Back at home, I worked methodically, swapping out the frosting on the cupcakes for a homemade version. The special ingredient? A generous dose of powdered laxative, the kind that promised fast-acting relief. By the time I was done, the cupcakes looked flawless, sweet, innocent, and entirely deceptive. That afternoon, I drove to Janet's house under the guise of dropping off a peace offering. When she opened the door, I greeted her with my best imitation of Melissa's cheerful smile. "I just wanted to thank you for coming to Eric's party last night. I thought you might enjoy these for your book club." Janet raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious, but she couldn't resist the allure of perfectly frosted cupcakes. She took the box with a tight-lipped smile, muttering something about how she hoped I wasn't trying too hard. I left her doorstep feeling lighter than I had in months. For once, I wasn't just enduring her cruelty, I was taking control. But as I drove home, a nagging thought crept in. Was I really doing this? Was I becoming someone as petty and vindictive as Janet? That doubt lingered until later that evening when Eric came home, oblivious as always. He mentioned in passing that Janet had called him to say she loved the cupcakes. Loved them. The irony was almost too much to handle. The real fun, though, was still to come. I didn't have to wait long. The next day around noon my phone started buzzing. First it was Eric. Then Melissa. Then, surprisingly, Janet herself. I ignored every call, letting them go to voicemail. By the time I listened to the first message, I was already bracing myself for chaos. And chaos it was. "What the hell did you put in those cupcakes?" Janet's voice was shrill, trembling with fury. "Everyone at book club got sick. Melissa said you dropped them off. What kind of sick joke is this?" I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out what my next move would be. Because while part of me felt vindicated, another part of me realized this was just the beginning. Janet wasn't the type to let something like this go quietly, and if she wanted a war, I was ready to fight. By the time the fallout hit full force, I realized I'd underestimated Janet's capacity for drama. What started as a small, almost laughable incident spiraled into a full-blown hurricane, and I found myself standing in its eye, equal parts exhilarated and terrified. The phone calls continued throughout the evening. Janet's voicemails became more frantic and accusatory with each passing hour. Melissa chimed in too, leaving a sugary sweet message that somehow managed to sound like both a plea for peace and a thinly veiled threat. "I know you didn't mean to upset anyone, but Janet is really hurt, and we're all wondering if there was a mix-up with the cupcakes." "A mix-up? Sure. Let's call it that." Eric noticed the calls but didn't press me about them. He had his own theory. "They probably want to lecture you about something again. Ignore it." For once, his indifference worked in my favor. The next morning, though, ignoring wasn't an option. Janet showed up unannounced, banging on my front door like a woman possessed. Eric had already left for work, leaving me to face the storm alone. I hesitated for a moment, considering whether I should even let her in. But then I realized something. This confrontation wasn't something to avoid, it was something to use. I opened the door with a calm expression, as if I had no idea why she was there. "Janet? Everything okay?" Her face was flushed, her hair slightly disheveled, and her eyes narrowed like she was about to pounce. "Don't you dare play innocent with me." She shoved a finger in my face, the perfect picture of righteous fury. "Those cupcakes you brought to my house? They made everyone at book club sick." "Everyone? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I tilted my head, frowning slightly. "Sick? Oh no, Janet, I had no idea. Are you sure it was the cupcakes? I ate some before I dropped them off, they were fine." That was a lie, of course, but Janet didn't know that. Her eyes flickered with doubt for a split second before her anger reignited. "Don't lie to me, young lady. This has your fingerprints all over it. Don't think I don't know what you're capable of." It was an interesting accusation, considering she'd spent years treating me like I was incapable of anything worthwhile. I decided to lean into the moment, feigning hurt. "Janet, I don't understand why you'd think I'd do something like that on purpose. I was just trying to thank you for coming to Eric's party. If anyone's to blame, maybe it's the bakery I bought them from. I can call and complain if you'd like." She flinched, her expression faltering. Janet thrived on control, and my calm demeanor was clearly throwing her off. "A bakery? You expect me to believe you didn't bake them yourself?" I shrugged. "I wish I had time to bake from scratch, but you know how it is with my job. It's just been so busy lately. Maybe Melissa would have had time, but, well, we can't all be Melissa, can we?" That hit a nerve. Janet's jaw tightened and she took a step back, her indignation replaced by something more guarded. She hated when I used her own backhanded compliments against her, but she couldn't call me out without admitting how nasty she'd been in the first place. "I don't believe you," she said finally. But her voice lacked the sharpness it had earlier. "You're hiding something. And trust me, I'll figure out what." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed off, slamming the door behind her. The moment she was gone, I let out a long, shaky breath. My heart was racing and my hands were trembling, but not from fear. For the first time, I wasn't the one caught off guard in one of Janet's games. I was playing my own and it felt intoxicating. But I knew this wasn't over. Janet was relentless, and her parting words echoed in my mind like a warning. She would dig. She would question. And when she couldn't find any proof, she'd make something up. That was her nature. The question now was simple. Could I stay ahead of her? Or had I just unleashed something I couldn't control? The fallout from Janet's accusations spread faster than I expected. By the next morning, word had reached Eric, who cornered me in the kitchen before I'd even had my coffee. "Mom says you brought cupcakes to her book club that made everyone sick." He crossed his arms, his tone hovering between suspicion and exhaustion. "What's going on?" I looked up from my mug, keeping my expression neutral. "I have no idea. I told her I bought those cupcakes from the bakery near Main Street. Maybe there was something wrong with the frosting." Eric groaned, rubbing his temples. "She's convinced you did it on purpose." "Do you believe that?" I asked softly, my eyes locking with his. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "I don't know, okay? This whole thing is just weird. You and my mom don't exactly get along, but you wouldn't do something like that. Would you?" "Of course not," I said, my voice steady but cool. "I've put up with her for over a decade, Eric. Do you think I'd suddenly snap and poison her book club?" The word poison made him flinch, and I didn't miss the guilt that flickered across his face. "I just need you to be honest with me," he said finally. "I am," I replied, meeting his gaze. "If your mom wants to turn this into a witch hunt, that's on her. I can't control what she chooses to believe." He sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "Fine. But can you at least call her and smooth things over? This is getting out of hand." I wanted to laugh. Smooth things over? With Janet? The woman who thrived on conflict? Instead, I nodded. "I'll think about it." That seemed to satisfy him, and he left for work, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The truth was, I knew this wasn't going to blow over on its own. Janet wouldn't let it. She needed to win, to prove she was right about me being the villain in her narrative. And if she couldn't find any real evidence, she'd fabricate it. Sure enough, by midday Melissa called. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to her message. "Hey, it's Melissa. Look, I don't know what's going on between you and Janet, but she's really upset. She said she found something weird in the trash after book club. I don't want to get involved, but you might want to talk to her before this gets worse." Weird in the trash? My stomach twisted. What could she have possibly found? I'd been careful, hadn't I? For the first time, doubt crept in. I replayed the events of that afternoon in my mind, trying to pinpoint any mistakes. Then it hit me. The pharmacy bag. I'd thrown it in the trash in my car, intending to get rid of it later. But what if it had fallen out when I grabbed the cupcakes? Janet must have seen it. That would explain why she was so certain I'd done something. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. If Janet thought she'd uncovered a smoking gun, she'd use it to her advantage. But evidence without context was just speculation. As long as I stuck to my story, she couldn't prove anything. That evening, I decided to make my move. Instead of waiting for Janet to strike again, I called her. "Janet," I said, keeping my tone light. "I wanted to check in. Eric mentioned you were upset about the cupcakes. I feel awful about what happened." Her response was immediate and cutting. "Spare me the act. I know what you did." "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, feigning confusion. "I found the laxative bottle," she snapped. "In your trash. Did you really think you'd get away with it?" My heart pounded, but I didn't let it show in my voice. "A laxative bottle? Janet, are you feeling okay? Why would I have something like that?" "Don't play dumb," she hissed. "It had your name on it." So she had found the pharmacy bag. That was a complication, but not an insurmountable one. I forced a laugh. "Oh, that. Janet, I've been dealing with some stomach issues lately. Stress. You know? My doctor recommended it. I didn't think it was a big deal." There was a long pause. I could practically hear her trying to connect the dots in a way that would support her theory. Finally, she said, "Convenient excuse. But I'm not buying it." "Believe what you want," I said, my tone sharpening. "But accusing me of sabotaging your book club is ridiculous even for you. If you keep spreading these lies, we're going to have a serious problem." I hung up before she could respond, my hands trembling. It was risky, but I needed to take control of the narrative. Janet was like a predator. If she sensed weakness, she'd pounce. Now it was a waiting game. Janet wasn't going to back down, but neither was I. And if she wanted to turn this into an all-out war, I was more than ready. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Melissa that sent a chill down my spine. Janet is talking about going to Eric with everything. She's convinced you're hiding something, and honestly, I don't know what to believe. Maybe you should just apologize and clear the air before this gets even messier. Apologize? Clear the air? As if Janet's whole mission wasn't to destroy me no matter what I said or did. Still, Melissa's message confirmed what I already suspected. Janet wasn't just playing house games anymore. She was escalating, pulling Eric deeper into her web. I needed to get ahead of her. Eric came home that evening looking unusually tense. He didn't say anything at first, but I caught him glancing at me from the corner of his eye, like he was trying to piece together a puzzle. When he finally spoke, his tone was careful, like he was testing the waters. "Mom called me today," he began. I set my glass of water down, meeting his gaze. "And?" He hesitated. "She said, look, she found something in her trash. A laxative bottle. She thinks that I poisoned her cupcakes?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. Eric winced. "She didn't use the word poison. She said you might have tampered with them." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You've got to be kidding me. And you're seriously entertaining this?" "I didn't say that," he said quickly. "But it's weird, don't you think? The timing? The fact that she found Eric." I cut him off again, my voice low but firm. "Do you know how insane this sounds? Your mother has hated me since the day we met. She's looking for any excuse to paint me as the villain. Are you really going to let her manipulate you like this?" He opened his mouth to respond but closed it again, clearly unsure. That hesitation, it was like a knife twisting in my chest. After 12 years of marriage, I still had to prove myself to him? "Fine," I said, standing abruptly. "If you can't trust me, maybe we should take this to someone impartial." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Let's go to the bakery," I said, grabbing my coat. "If the cupcakes were bad, they'll confirm it. And if your mom still wants to accuse me after that, I'll happily take it up with a lawyer." Eric looked stunned but didn't argue. I think part of him was relieved I was taking such a firm stance. It gave him a way out of choosing sides. The bakery visit was uneventful but necessary. I asked for the manager, explaining in detail how my mother-in-law had accused me of buying spoiled cupcakes. The manager, a kind-looking older woman, assured us they hadn't had any complaints and even pulled up their inventory records to show everything was fresh that day. I kept my composure, but inside I felt the first flicker of victory. The evidence, or lack thereof, was on my side. Eric seemed satisfied, at least for the moment. "Okay," he said as we left. "Maybe Mom overreacted. I'll talk to her." But when he tried calling Janet, she didn't pick up. That night, as I sat in bed scrolling through my phone, a notification popped up from an unknown number. It was a message, a photo. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. The image showed a crumpled pharmacy bag with my name printed clearly on the label. Beneath it, a text read, "Let's see how Eric feels when he sees this." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Janet. It had to be her. She'd gone full scorched earth, and now she was threatening to use the bag as leverage. But then another thought hit me. What if it wasn't Janet? What if someone else had gotten involved? Melissa, perhaps? She had access to Janet's house, and she was always so quick to play the mediator, the peacemaker. The possibility sent a chill down my spine. Janet was ruthless, but Melissa? She was calculating in a way that Janet wasn't. And if Melissa was pulling strings behind the scenes, I was dealing with a much bigger threat than I realized. I deleted the message but saved the photo. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. If Janet or Melissa thought they could back me into a corner, they were sorely mistaken. I wasn't going to let them win, but I also wasn't going to wait for their next move. This time I'd strike first. The next morning I was ready. Janet had declared war, and Melissa might have been her secret weapon, but I wasn't going to be outmaneuvered. If they wanted to turn Eric against me, they'd have to work a lot harder. The first step in my plan was simple: play the long game. I needed to dismantle Janet's accusations piece by piece, until they collapsed under their own weight. And to do that, I had to stay ahead of her every move. When Eric left for work, I called Janet. She didn't answer, of course, so I left a voicemail, my voice dripping with feigned concern. "Hi Janet, it's me. I've been thinking about our conversation and I really want to clear the air. Eric and I went to the bakery yesterday, and they assured us the cupcakes were fresh. I'd hate for a misunderstanding to hurt our family, so please let me know when we can talk." It was a calculated move designed to put her on the defensive. If she responded, She'd either have to double down on her accusations or admit she had no proof. If she didn't, it would look like she was avoiding reconciliation. Either way, I'd win that round. But Janet didn't take the bait. Instead, Melissa showed up at my door that afternoon, unannounced and looking unusually serious. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tight. I hesitated for just a second before stepping aside to let her in. Melissa didn't waste any time. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you and Janet, but this is getting out of hand," she said, crossing her arms. "She's furious. Eric's stuck in the middle. And honestly, it's making the rest of us really uncomfortable." I raised an eyebrow. "Uncomfortable?" "Melissa, she accused me of poisoning her book club. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" Melissa sighed, her expression softening slightly. "I know Janet can be difficult, but she's convinced she's right about this. She's even talking about showing Eric the pharmacy bag she found." So she had seen the bag. But the way she said it, almost like a warning, made me pause. Was she trying to protect me? Or was this part of her own agenda? "I have nothing to hide," I said finally. "If Janet wants to make herself look ridiculous, that's her choice. But I won't let her drag me down with her." Melissa studied me for a moment, her gaze unreadable. Then she nodded. "Okay, just be careful. Janet isn't going to let this go easily." With that, she left, leaving me more unsettled than before. Melissa's visit felt too convenient, too perfectly timed. Was she genuinely trying to help, or was she testing the waters for Janet? That evening, Eric came home looking even more strained than before. He sat down across from me at the dinner table, his shoulders slumped. "Mom sent me something today," he said, pulling out his phone. My stomach tightened as he showed me the photo of the pharmacy bag. "She's demanding an explanation. She's even talking about getting the whole family involved." I forced myself to stay calm. "And what do you think?" Eric sighed. "I don't know. I want to believe you, but why didn't you tell me about the laxatives?" I leaned forward, keeping my tone measured. "Because it's personal, Eric. I've been dealing with stress-related stomach issues for months, but I didn't want to worry you. And now Janet's twisting it into something it's not." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly conflicted. "This is a mess. I just want it to stop." "So do I," I said softly. "But Eric, you need to see what's really happening here. This isn't about the cupcakes or the bag. This is about Janet trying to control you and us. Are you really going to let her?" He didn't answer, but the doubt in his eyes told me I was getting through to him. The next day I made my final move. I called Janet again, this time leaving a different kind of voicemail. "Janet, I know you're upset, and I want to make things right. But if you keep spreading these accusations without proof, I'll have no choice but to involve a lawyer. This has gone far enough." It was a bold gamble, but I needed to put her on notice. If she thought I was bluffing, she'd push harder. But if she believed I was serious, she might back off to save face. By the end of the day, Eric told me Janet had called him, sounding unusually subdued. She'd agreed to let the matter drop, though she didn't apologize. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough. For now. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Janet might have retreated, but she wasn't done. And Melissa? Her motives were still a mystery. One thing was certain, though. I wasn't going to let my guard down. Not with a family like this. The storm finally broke during Sunday dinner at Janet's house. Eric had insisted we attend, hoping to smooth things over, though I suspected he just wanted to avoid another week of tension. I agreed, but only because I knew it was time to take control once and for all. Janet greeted us with her usual strained smile, though the glint in her eyes betrayed her lingering hostility. Melissa was there too, hovering near Janet like a loyal lieutenant. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, but I played my part, chatting politely and pretending I hadn't spent the past week dismantling Janet's narrative. Dinner was uneventful at first, but as we moved to the living room for coffee, Janet struck. "I suppose," she began, her voice dripping with faux innocence, "it's too much to hope for an apology after everything that's happened." Eric stiffened beside me. Melissa looked at her lap. I set down my cup deliberately, meeting Janet's gaze head-on. "An apology for what, Janet?" "For something I didn't do." Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, let's not play games, dear. You know exactly what I'm talking about." "I do," I said, my tone calm but firm. "And I also know this isn't about cupcakes or pharmacy bags. This is about control." That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed. "Control? Don't be ridiculous." "No, let's be honest for once," I continued, my voice steady. "You've been trying to undermine me since the day I married Eric. You've called me lazy, made snide comments about my career, And now you're accusing me of something so absurd I can't even say it with a straight face. Janet opened her mouth to respond, but I raised a hand to stop her. I've stayed quiet for years, Janet, hoping things would get better. But they haven't. And they won't because you don't see me as your son's wife. You see me as competition. And frankly, I'm done playing that game. The room fell silent. Eric stared at me, his expression a mixture of shock and something else, pride maybe? Melissa shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Janet, however, wasn't ready to concede. You're twisting things, she said, her voice trembling with anger. I've only ever wanted what's best for Eric. Then support him, I said sharply. Support us. Because if you keep tearing me down, you're not helping him, you're hurting him. And whether you like it or not, I'm not going anywhere. Janet's face reddened, but she didn't respond. For once she had no comeback. Eric cleared his throat, breaking the tension. Mom, she's right. This has gone too far. If you can't respect my wife, then I don't know how we're supposed to move forward. That was the final blow. Janet's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment I thought she might explode. But instead she nodded stiffly, her gaze fixed on the floor. I see, she said quietly. If that's how you feel, then I suppose I have no choice. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest I'd ever get. As we left that evening, Eric took my hand and squeezed it gently. I'm proud of you, he said, his voice soft. You stood your ground. Finally, I replied with a small smile. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me something I wish I'd understood years ago. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out, they're about protecting what matters most. For women in their 40s, especially those navigating complicated family dynamics, it's easy to lose yourself in the expectations of others. But the truth is, you can't control how people treat you. You can only control how you respond. Janet may never change, but I've learned to stop giving her power over my happiness. And in doing so, I've reclaimed a part of myself I thought I'd lost. Life's too short to play by someone else's rules. Sometimes you have to write your own.